When Rome falls, we see two responses. We see the response of the Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire, and the area in the West in response to the Roman Empire that basically try to restart the empire, reestablish some sort of legitimacy based on Rome. And then we see the response of new empires forming that have an entirely new way of doing government, unlike the classical empires. The Islamic caliphates, which come out of the religion of Islam, are such a kind of government. They seek to establish something new, without reference necessarily to the past classical empires. In order to understand them, we have to understand the religion. And in order to understand the religion, we have to look at the culture in which the religion is found. The religion is founded in basically post-Rome Arabia. The Arabian Peninsula was never conquered by Rome, but it was certainly impacted by it and impacted by the Sassanid Empire in Mesopotamia that had been impacted by Rome previously. This area is predominantly desert and therefore is populated mostly by tribes that have a very strong chief at the middle and everyone follows, as well as deeply involved in the trade that's happening between the classical empires historically and even continuing that trade now that the classical empires have fallen. They've domesticated camel. They're using that camel for their trade. And they've adapted to their environment. They live in tents. They domesticate animals. They're pastoral nomads who are quite willing to live in some of the harshest conditions. And yet, we see in pastoral nomads around this time that in order to remain pastoral and nomadic, they need to be closely connected to civilized, settled communities in order to engage in trade and get things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to have. It's into that context that Muhammad comes and starts the religion of Islam. Muhammad has a pretty unimpressive beginning life story. But in 610, when he's out meditating in the wilderness, he claims, the angel Gabriel. This angel Gabriel gives him a new set of revelation about God and about the world. It's basically a new religion. It comes out of and is connected to Judaism and Christianity. It flows from some of those branches. It recognizes some of those leaders. But it says that Muhammad is the last and final prophet of all the other people that you might find in Christianity and Islam, Christianity and Judaism. And it certainly disagrees in certain key areas from both religions. Muhammad goes back to his town of Mecca, and by 620 has a decent group of followers who will eventually codify his writings into the book, the Quran. However, he does make some pretty powerful enemies. The leader of some of those tribes that we've mentioned earlier were threatened by his new belief of monotheism. See, the thing about polytheism is you can make a lot of money off of it. There's a lot of festivals, there's a lot of trade shrines that you can post taxes on. And so not only by changing the religion are you challenging cultural and even political power, but you are also questioning economic power, and those people do not usually like you. So Muhammad eventually, with his followers, flees by 622, which is the year of the Hijrah. This is when Muhammad flees north from Mecca to the city of Medina. This is what Muhammad scholars count as point zero on their timeline. Just like 0 AD is based on Caesar Augustus around the time of Jesus, Muhammad's calendar and Muslim scholars will use 0, this date of his move to Medina, as the beginning of their calendar. While in Medina, Muhammad and his followers create a community, not just a religious community, but even a political community, which is known as the Ummah. Let's give this just a little bit of geographic context. So, of course, we have the Roman Empire had taken over this whole area, including North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. That's now fallen. You have the Byzantine Empire over here. And then down in this area, as the Sassanids are falling apart, you see the Saudi Arabia Empire beginning to form. In the middle of Saudi Arabia, towards the Red Sea, you see Mecca. North of that is Medina. Muhammad eventually returns from Medina to Mecca with an army. And he attacks Mecca, but over a period of time, eventually entering without serious bloodshed, with wide open gates. He makes Mecca now a Muslim town. And he begins shortly thereafter a kind of incorporation and also clearing out of some of the traditions that you find in that Saudi Arabian culture. He does establish this concept of a pilgrimage to the Kaaba. Most of the polytheistic shrines and statues were destroyed by Muhammad when he would come into places, except for this strange stone, the Kaaba. It's a black stone. If you look at it, it seems a little mysterious. There's no flaw in it, perceivably, and it's black and deep and kind of mysterious in that sense. Muhammad kept it, even though it had been worshipped as something of another god. He kept it because he believed it symbolized characteristics of Allah. And so he believed that it was a symbol to be visited by every Muslim. In fact, that becomes one of the first of the 5 pillars of Islam, pilgrimage to Mecca to see the Kaaba. There's a picture of that pillar. The other pillars include a confession of faith, which happens daily, in which Muslims declare that they believe that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his prophet. That is involved as well in prayer, which happens 5 times a day, facing towards no other place but Mecca. Also, charity is a part of the Muslim religion, and Muhammad also teaches this holiday called Ramadan, which is a month of fasting during the day and then feasting at night. Keeping those 5 pillars are part of the Muslim creed. This is what you do in order to be a good Muslim. The concept of jihad, which we'll talk about at other points, is considered by some a 6th pillar, is considered by some to be a form of fighting against sin within, and others of fighting enemies without. Just to take a quick look at pillar number 1 and pillar number 2 in greater detail, we see their confession of faith, and Muslims do not believe in creating images, lest those become idols. So they use words as art. And you see a really good example of this down here, which is the Declaration of Faith written in Arabic as a form of artwork. Where do they pray? Well, they pray in mosques, and these have stones within them that point towards Mecca, so you know where to pray. And mosques start springing up all over the place as Muhammad starts building an empire. It's really important to note, he begins as a religious leader, and he very quickly creates a political system. So Islam is both religious and political from day 1 of Muhammad's teachings. In fact, by the time of Muhammad's death, he had conquered not just Mecca, but also surrounding regions, basically by force, converting many of his fellow tribes to Islam. In these places, and as it only continues to spread, we see these mosques, which are symbols and places of worship. Here's a good example of a one from the Umayyad, the early dynasty, and you just see some of the Romanesque and even Corinthian columns, so they're very much still impacted by the Hellenistic architecture and Hellenistic art forms. However, you're seeing that blending then with this new religion of Islam. Furthermore, again, because they do not use images, they'll use patterns and geometric shapes as form of art, and this becomes arabesque. And that arabesque art is found multiple places, and it's important to notice this because we're going to see that come up as the Arabic Empire begins to grow.